get started. Please rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all.
We need to unmute Nan.
I think I am unmuted.
She's on.
Oh, you're unmuted though. You can hear us.
I
Perfect.
can.
And we can hear you. Actually, the volume, Nan, is a little bit light on your end. I don't know
Oh,
if that's
okay.
us.
I need to sometimes, let me turn it up.
Just sending, resending her the link.
Is that better?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
very good.
perfect. Thank you.
Perfect.
Bob, can you hear us okay?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep. Thank
I don't
you.
know how to get that on the screen.
But did you see, Chrissy, is there a is Taryn on? Did you see her by any chance? I have her cell, I don't believe, but.
Who's the other one?
I'm not sure who she is.
Oh, I do have
Lisa?
hers.
Yeah, I'm admitting one right now.
Here's Taryn.
Okay, perfect.
And
Oh, perfect.
I think that's everybody for now.
Okay,
Mhm.
terrific. So everyone should have gotten the
Before-
seeker.
We have to go through
Form.
the agenda.
Oh, we've got an agenda.
Yep.
Sorry. I thought we
Yeah,
were
I
starting
wanna-
with the.
I want to get Danielle on so she can leave.
Oh, perfect. Great.
Okay, Danielle.
So in December of 2021, the previous rec director had applied for a grant for composting toilets. And she was awarded the grant, but then it kind of fell to the wayside. And Chrissy, thank you, Chrissy, for finding it and reaching out to Dasney, who got the grant from.
It's
So it's
awesome.
alive again and it's happening. And
How much was the grant for?
$50,000?
That's awesome.
Yeah, for a single composting toilet. So in the packet, it shows you the model that we're looking at, which is pretty much top of the line.
Yep.
It has a metal roof, it has solar, it has, the siding on it does not need maintenance. It's great. So,
Awesome.
if you want to look through that and approve it, then I can get started on ordering it. Making that happen.
Yeah.
It's a nice structure.
Yeah, we're kind of under a
Yeah.
deadline because the grant was going to lapse.
Oh, okay.
This is awesome.
What's-
Right?
Yeah.
So Matt will be able to dig the hole for us, and then dig the hole to put the composting part
The
in the
site.
ground.
Yeah, I mean, anybody have any problem with that?
No, I think
No,
that's
we're just
nice.
gonna get moving.
Grant, so-
Yeah,
I,
well,
I remember you talking, Danielle, about you wanting to do one. So the fact that it was already in process and we already have the funding for it is
We can
great.
only do composting in toilets in a place that doesn't have water already,
Okay.
Mhm.
so.
Let's just make it official.
Yep.
Make a
Sure.
motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I'll
All
second.
in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
You got it.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Danielle.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Danielle.
Danielle, you need an extra copy.
Going up.
Okay, Leslie, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't see the agenda there. So we have the part 2 secret application, which we need to go through line by line.
Mhm.
Nan is with us to kind of help walk us through it. I should mention that we have received feedback from the planning board, the CAC, and from county. Any concerns or comments raised by the planning board or the CAC, we can go through as we hit each of these, whichever relates to each of these items that we need to review. I would mention that county just sent a very simple response back that it's a local matter. I'm going to find that matter of local concern. So it's same as they did the first time that we
Yeah.
submitted. So there were more substantive comments on the other two. We did submit to neighboring municipalities. I was in contact with the mayor and Pete Doro yesterday. Their planning board had it, for 30 days, as did Mike Herzog. If they had any comments, they're welcome to let us know. We got comments from them the first time, if you recall, about just letting us know that we couldn't hook up to village septic, whoever would be in the parcel across from Bennett, should
Correct.
there be someone there. That was their only comment, and there was nothing substantive beyond that that would have, that was different besides us providing more context around capacity in the areas and then adding the natural resources inventory. So anyway, I don't see them having any other further comment. Nan, do you want to take it from the top for us, or?
Yeah, sure. So I wanted to just give a quick little overview just to get everybody on the same page of where we're at with this. And I still feel that there's some, not necessarily among you guys, but some of the comments that I've seen makes me feel that there's still a little misunderstanding about what the overlay district is. So I just wanted to start off by reminding everybody that the hospitality overlay is, if you think about it as each district is like a sandwich. And every layer of the district, there's an echo in there. I don't know why. Let me just turn my sound on just a little bit.
Hey, Gary, are you intending this to reopen the public hearing? If so, I think you need a motion.
Okay.
No, this is
No.
not, this is just for secret. This is not.
Public hearing is still open.
So I just want, so when you have an overlay district, it sits on top of your other rules and regulations in your zoning law. So whatever rules and regulations, procedures, criteria, standards, everything that's in the zoning, the overlay is in addition, or maybe even stricter than what's underneath it. So when we, in this local law where we are creating an overlay district, we're not carving out something totally separate. We are adding to it so that when we say in the hospitality overlay that any proposal within the overlay needs a site plan review or a special use permit, what that means is that you have to go back to the zoning law and read the criteria that are associated with special use permits and site plan review. So it's in addition to those things. And I think there's some confusion that people think that the overlay district is something kind of by itself, and it's not. We have to look at it all together. And so I wanted to remind folks that when there's, as I said, where there's a proposal for an inn in the hospitality overlay, they have to get a special use permit. You have to get site plan review. That project has to go through seeker review. Most likely, based on its location, would have to get county planning board review. It has to meet all of the Department of Health rules. So I want to just make sure that everyone understands that this is not something, totally isolated. And so all of the other things in your zoning still stand. And so I wanted to just very quickly remind folks that, for instance, in your section 473 of your zoning law, which is the special use permit section, there are 14 criteria that the planning board must meet. Then they must find that whatever comes before it, it must meet. And that includes that it has to protect health, safety, and welfare. It has to protect ground and surface water. It can't be injurious to property values. It has to be the size, scale, and intensity harmonious with the district. It can't have an adverse impact on the development and use of adjacent buildings. It can't have adverse impacts related to noise, fumes, or glare. It cannot cause traffic congestion or create a traffic hazard. Parking has to be appropriate and screened. It has to meet all the requirements of all of the other rules in the zoning. And in site plan, it's even stricter. There are requirements for siting, so that there has to be streetscape. It has to be the height, the scale, and the building coverage that meets the zoning. It has like 20 different landscaping criteria. It has to meet lighting criteria. It has to meet building design criteria. So all of those things are in play in the hospitality overlay. We're not ignoring those. Those are part of what is going to be required when a proposal comes forward. So I want to just make sure that folks understand that there's a whole process and a very rigorous review that would be required if a proposal for an inn were to come before the planning board for for an inn in the hospitality overlay. So is there any questions on how the overlay works with the zoning? I mean, the overlay is part of the zoning. It's not something totally separate. So is everyone up to speed on that, do you think? Are there questions? Okay.
Not from
No.
us
Not for me.
now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the other thing that I wanted to explain too is that when you do a seeker, it has the 3 parts. The part 1 is information about the project. Our project right now is adopting this local law. It's not approving an inn. It's not approving a specific proposal that might be out there. It's approving and adopting the local law. So that's what part 1 of the forms that you have already received and was submitted to the county describes the information about the project. Part 2, which is what we're going to go over tonight, the role of part 2 is to identify if there are any potential adverse environmental impacts. Potential. It doesn't mean that we know there are or but there's a potential for. So where we really are thinking right now for tonight's meeting is there a potential for adverse environmental impacts? When we finish part 2, then the board will move into part 3. And the role of part 3 is to identify if any of those adverse impacts that were identified as potentially moderate to large, are any of them significant? With the key word being significant. The seeker looks for significant adverse impact. And you may find that there are an adverse impact, but they may not be significant. And so at the end, where you finish up with part 3, you will have identified whether there are any significant adverse environmental impacts. And then from that, your determination of whether it's a negative declaration or a positive declaration comes from. So for tonight's discussion, we're really looking at, are there impacts and are they, and what seeker uses is we have 2 categories. No or small impact is, if you look at the form, and I can share the screen if that would be of any help.
I think we all
Just share the
have
screen?
the form.
We have, yeah.
You have, okay, so the first
And
column.
we
where you
circulated
see-
it to the board, but I can share that.
So we either have no or small impact or moderate to large impact. Anything that gets checked off in the moderate to large category is what gets discussed in part 3 as whether they're actually significant or not. So tonight's job is really to go through the part 2 and identify A, whether there are any impacts, and B, adverse impacts, and B, if there are, do you consider them to be a small impact or a moderate to large impact? And DEC offers a workbook that goes along with the environmental assessment forms. If there's any question about what a moderate to large impact might be, there's guidance that DEC provides on what those terms mean for each one of these questions. So what I have provided you is a draft. It's your responsibility to take a hard look and go through these. I've kind of given this to you as a starter list, as a draft. In our discussion tonight, we can change whatever you feel needs to be changed. So it's really a place to start for the discussion. So any questions on the difference between part 1, part 2, and part 3?
No.
Okay, so I look at this when when I fill this out, some communities look at this as the adoption of a law is really just, it's you're adopting a piece of paper, and the act of adopting itself doesn't cause anything to happen. It doesn't cause, there's not a bulldozer out there waiting to build something. When I look at these things, I look at, well, the law will allow something to happen. And so I look at these in the light of, if something were to be proposed as a result of this law, would it have potential adverse impact? And the first question is impact on land. And so the first question is, would the proposed action involve construction on or physical alteration of the land surface of the proposed site? So again, the adoption of the law doesn't itself create any kind of physical alteration of the land, but it could result in a physical alteration of the land. So I recommended in this draft form that we say yes there, because it's feasible that something will come up in one of these hospitality areas and will involve construction and cause physical alteration of the land surface. So my thinking on that was that is a yes. And when you answer the question yes, then we have to look at the sub questions that go along with it. And so it looks at whether there are, whether there's land that where the depth to water table is less than 3 feet, or steep slopes, where bedrock might be exposed, 1,000 tons of natural material removed, different phases of a project in multiple phases result in increased erosion, or in a coastal erosion hazard area. So some of those, and it's kind of hard in seeker because it mixes no and small. So when I evaluated this, some of these are clearly a no, like we're not in a coastal erosion hazard zone. And, we're not going to be excavating or removing more than 1,000 tons of natural material, for example. So those are the kinds of questions that are checked off. Really, we're thinking no. But understanding that, there could be some activity where the land surface is changed, and there could be some erosion. There could be, I don't think there were, I'd have to go back to the maps. I don't think in the places, since we are looking at areas that are mostly already developed and we're adaptively reusing, that some of these categories fit. And the important thing to remember is that when a project comes before the planning board for an actual redo of one of those buildings or to create an inn, that application will have to go through its own environmental review. It's going to have to meet all of those special use and site plan criteria. It's going to have to meet the Dutchess County Health Department for water and septic. It's going to have to meet all of the rules in the community in your zoning. So I looked at these and drafted, subject to your discussion, that these would be either no or small impacts, and that we have the SWIP, which is the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, and all of those other requirements that the planning board and the applicant will have to go through and meet those criteria, and seeker for that project, which is designed to either avoid or mitigate adverse and significant adverse environmental impacts. So that's kind of how I looked at the impact on land question. And so I put it back on your table for questions, discussion, what your opinions on that would be.
And letter H, can you explain that?
Letter H?
Yeah, it goes through A through H.
Yes,
You
H.
see that?
So I added that one just as a note. So I added in the gray box where it says small impacts may occur and the land surface could be altered. That was my text that I added. That's not part of seeker. And then
Okay.
H is really a note to say that we recognize that a project is going to have a stormwater pollution prevention plan, and all of the other requirements of the zoning serve to minimize impacts to land surfaces.
So I don't disagree with any of this. 'Cause
Yeah, I reviewed it and I agree too. How do you, but then how do you suggest, do we go through each section and kind of,
We
Ask
could go down
resolution or-
through we can go through each one, and discuss what it means. If that certainly is the most thorough way to do it, if.
I know,
didn't
I agree with that approach. I just was asking, do we approve each section? Like we're all in agreement with how
Oh,
we
yes,
respond to
yes,
impact
yes,
on land,
yes,
and the
definitely.
impact on geological
But you don't need a
features.
separate resolution each time.
No.
Okay,
So as you go through it, in each section, you can come to a consensus that you're okay moving on.
Exactly.
That way you end up at the end of the day with your completed document, and then you do it.
okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you for that. That's
Sure.
really helpful. Mike,
So this is an
Very-
opportunity, you're thinking out there for these areas where the hospitality district, overlay district is proposed. What could be the actions that would be construction or physical alteration of the land surface. Now, we're not really talking about water or aquifers or wildlife. Those are examined in questions that will come. So we're kind of looking at these A through G areas of changes to the land surface.
So the topography you're talking about.
Right.
Okay.
So again, I'm good with her answer.
I'm fine. Mhm.
I agree with this draft.
I don't need to any.
Gary and Mike, are you in agreement
Yeah.
with that first section?
Yeah.
And then impact on geological features, Nan, is section 2.
Yeah, so the reason that one is checked no is because that is specifically looking at what the geological features are specifically defined in seeker. We're looking at, are there any things like cliffs, dunes, caves, fossil beds, and things like that? And in these areas, those don't exist. So that was why I suggested it's a no, because those resources aren't on that site.
Right.
Yep.
It's easy enough. Yep.
So moving on to the impacts of surface water. So this is asking, could the proposed action affect one or more wetlands or other surface water bodies, streams, rivers, ponds, or lakes? So we know that the creek goes through calling it the eastern or the westernmost part of the hospitality overlay. And conservatively, yes, there are things that could affect that surface water body. So as I was working on it, in honesty, the answer is yes. We recognize that the creek is on one of those parcels, and you could build a house on that parcel and it could affect the creek. So I checked off yes. And again, these are listed, all of these kinds of potential impacts could be a mix of either no impact or what I considered a small impact. So things about, are we creating a new water body? We're not digging, we're not creating a pit. So that was a no. Would it result in an increase or decrease of over 10% or 10 acre of the surface water body? That's a no, because it's not a lake or a pond. It's a creek, a stream. Is it going to dredge 100 cubic yards? That's a no. Would it involve construction within or adjoining a freshwater or tidal wetland or in the bed or banks of any other wetland or water body? That's a yes. We know that there's the stream that goes through that property. But again, if you look at where the existing building is outside of the wetland area, looking at that the site plan requirements and the special review or special use permit requirements have criteria in there about not disturbing or adversely impacting surface water bodies. So your zoning itself is set up to not allow for those kinds of impacts. So if the planning board ever were to get a project and someone proposed extending, like having building that goes all the way to the creek, that would be a whole nother set of rules and regulations they would have to meet. The DEC stream bank rules and all sorts of other things would come into play. But where the actual building is actually outside, at least from the mapped, what we see on the maps, is outside of that area. And any proposal that would come up for that area would I would imagine the planning board, as per the zoning, would have to have the wetlands delineated, and you would know exactly where the wetlands and any buffers that would be required would be. So given all of the rules and regulations and the need to stay out of the wetlands, I suggest that would be a small, not a no impact, but there's a small impact, potential small impact to that one.
And
Yes.
so because that was when I'm reading this, that was my reaction, that we have a wetlands law to protect that stream. We have that
Correct.
100-foot buffer.
We have local and we have state, the DEC, if it's a regulated wetland, we have stream bank permits that are needed if there's any kind of stream disturbance. So there's multiple layers of criteria and requirements that would have to be met.
In addition to septic and other things that would be.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep, the septic would have to be 100 feet from the edge of the stream. The well would have to be 100 feet from that septic system. So there's a lot of other constraints that would have to be met before these things could, move forward. So, this, any project in there would not be withdrawing water from surface water. It would have to have a well. That the proposed action may include construction of one or more outfalls for discharge. Some stormwater management methods do have a discharge to surface waters. That's how the stormwater pollution prevention plan is done. But the way those are engineered is that the water, basically the surface water, the runoff is treated before it's discharged. And those are, if you follow the New York State DEC stormwater manual, then they consider those impacts mitigated. So again, the stormwater pollution prevention plan would be required along with all of these other things. So is there a possibility? Yes. Is it a big possibility? In my opinion, it was small. Creating erosion, affecting the water quality of the water bodies. Yes, there is certainly a small potential impact there. Application of pesticides or herbicides. Actually, your site plan and special use, I think it was in the site plan law, specifically says, no, sorry, take that back. It was in the aquifer area. It specifically says no herbicides or pesticides shall be allowed. So anything that goes into the hospitality overlay would not be allowed to use pesticides or herbicides to control weeds or whatever else. So that's where the strength of the rest of your zoning comes in to address some of these environmental issues that may come up, which you've kind of already thought of. They're already in your zoning law. The proposed action may require construction of new or expansion of existing wastewater treatment facilities. That would be a sewage treatment plant. Anything in those areas are going to need a septic system, and any septic system that's designed would have to meet Dutchess County Department of Health requirements that would be designed to protect those surface water bodies. So, you know, being honest that there is a potential for impact, I think they're small, given the totality of all of the requirements and regulations that would have to be met. We do recognize that there are wetlands and along the Wappingers Creek, and so that's why I said yes, I recommended yes, but small to no impacts for this one.
Yeah, I reviewed it and I agreed with your
Yes
assessment.
is incorrect.
Gary, do you have any
Yeah.
comments?
The second-
Joe?
that's
I don't have any
part- That's part two.
Okay.
Section 2.
Section 3, the surface water one.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're on agreement on 3, Nan. Thank
Okay.
you.
So 4 is impact on groundwater. And I wanted to point out that none of these hospitality overlay areas are in the watershed that serves the village, which is over to the northeast of the village. So you have really 2 things going on with aquifers in the town. One is the village's watershed rules and regulations, which you recognize in your zoning. But these areas are not in that watershed area. You also have an aquifer protection overlay, which, if you look at the map, the area across from Bennett is a little pocket of, and as well as over by the Cottonwood, is mapped as the zone 1, in the zone 1 aquifer protection overlay area. So again, we recognize that any kind of development that has a septic system and has a parking lot or anything else, you're digging in the dirt, could impact groundwater. I mean, just as an aside, we're seeing solar farms in limestone areas changing the direction of the water because they're pounding new cracks in the ground. Anything can have a potential impact on groundwater. So could these inns have an impact on groundwater? Yes. Again, but looking at the totality of the rules and regulations that must be met, there are multiple layers of requirements that would have to be met. And I wanted to remind you what the zone 1 of your aquifer protection overlay means. It's a shall, and it means that any development in the aquifer protection area shall not alter subsurface flow, shall not degrade water quality, shall not increase risk of contamination, and shall not be less than 5 feet from the water table. So right off the bat, in those areas, you're already starting with criteria that would have to be met by any development in those hospitality areas. And I also want to point out that your aquifer protection overlay does not restrict this kind of development. It restricts things like disposal wells, discharge areas, industrial sludge and toxic chemicals, wastewater lagoons and pits, fertilizer storage, pesticide and herbicide use, petroleum storage tanks, above ground tanks with proper design are allowed, and water wells and even abandoned wells are allowed, and they must meet Dutchess County requirements. So there's nothing in your aquifer protection overlay that specifically prohibits building in an aquifer area. They have to meet the criteria though. So again, just like the other areas, given that we recognize that there could be an impact on groundwater, and also in recognition that you have an aquifer overlay whose requirements have to be met, and all of the Dutchess County water and sewer things that have to be met, DEC stormwater that has to be met, stream bank protections that have to be met. That is again what led me to suggest that these are either no or small impacts.
And I think, Nan, you pointed it out earlier, but I think when residents, or I shouldn't speak for all residents, but when there's concern over the aquifer, or referring to on our map, the aquifer protection area that surrounds, and you can see it in the NRI, the aquifer that supplies the village's water. That is not what you're talking about when you're talking about aquifer, this aquifer 1 zone. That's totally separate.
Totally
And that
separate.
aquifer 1 zone runs underneath a big section of the village with buildings on top.
Yeah, and the way, and I could show you the map if you're interested in it, but your aquifer protection overlay pretty much has some level of aquifer from, the whole northern half of the town. There's aquifers everywhere. And people draw their water from a groundwater source, which is an aquifer. So even a house which draws water from, would potentially impact groundwater. So again, I don't want to ignore the fact that there is potential for groundwater impacts. But everything that would come with an actual proposal would have to go through and meet the special use criteria, the site plan criteria, the aquifer protection area criteria, the Dutchess County criteria, or the Dutchess County Department of Health standards. So there's multiple layers of regulations that would have to be met. And again, for all of those reasons, I felt adoption of really what we're doing is we're creating an opportunity for someone to make the case that they could meet all of those standards by adopting the hospitality overlay.
So did we go through one? No?
I reviewed all of them and
Yeah.
was in agreement here. I don't know if you all want to read
So we
through
went,
them. I mean, it's the proposed action may require the bulk storage of petroleum or
Yeah.
chemical
Yeah.
products, no
Um,
pesticides.
Yeah,
okay.
no, Nan's recommendation
Yeah,
is
that's fine.
appropriate.
Gary, you're in agreement too?
Yeah.
So on section 5, impact on flooding,
That
Nan
one
put-
was,
no.
that one I said no, because there's no map flood areas in those areas.
There is, there has been feedback that areas around the Cottonwood flood.
Like in the recent,
And they
Okay.
do,
Yeah.
but that's not where the building is now. And wouldn't that be something that and that's not a designated floodplain. I guess that's the difference.
Well, it's partly
it?
the designated floodplain. It's partly that some development changes the volume or the direction of floodwater. So, so it's even when you don't have a mapped floodplain, there could be impacts on flooding because you're changing you put a building somewhere and it changes where the water goes. So, I guess with the local knowledge that area, there has been flooding there, we could change this to a yes, and then go through each one of these A through G items and see what you think about each one.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that would be best.
yeah, because I mean, the photographs that I've seen, it is on the land kind of into part of the parking lot. It's not
Yeah.
where
Okay.
and I'm sure that the owners don't want to, maybe, whatever their plans are, they want to avoid that as much as
Right.
we want them to
Right.
avoid
Right.
that. But I think maybe we should mark yes, just because of that.
And much of that flooding is occurring because upstream is flooding.
The excess water that we
Correct.
had, and that can
All off of South
that
Road.
can make a
all down
drought,
through
be a flood zone.
44
So
right into that
but
area.
we have to put yes on this.
Okay,
There
so
is a
we'll change that to
potential.
yes.
Yeah.
And we go through the actual questions then. the first three, I would say would be a no, because there's no designated floodway. It's not a mapped 100 or 500-year floodplain.
Mhm.
But we could say, so then let's talk about the proposed action may result in or require a modification of existing drainage patterns. So, yes, you know,
Yes,
we're building a
definitely.
parking lot,
Right.
and that could change existing drainage patterns.
Mhm.
Then the question is, do you feel that that would be a small impact, given the kinds of design criteria the project would have to go through, or is that a potential moderate to large impact?
I mean, I would argue probably small impact because it's an adaptive reuse and there's already a parking lot. The parking lot is there and there's a parking lot in front and back. So, you know,
Would the building of a parking lot or expansion or blacktopping or whatever add to the flooding that we've already gotten pictures of?
Mhm.
I believe the flooding that we've gotten pictures of are occurring because of all the runoff and the problems upstream, coming off of the Horseshoe, coming down through South Road, coming off of the industry area. All that's draining down to those farm ponds and fields. And that's what's running under and over to the Cottonwood. So
I'm
I
gonna-
think building here,
Yeah,
it's not really adding to it, but it's modifying it.
I'm gonna say for our action for the proposed overlay is going to have a small impact. Okay, but that does not say that any proposal coming forward, and they have to go through these questions again, it might change
Oh, yeah.
to moderate. But for our action, I'm saying that it's no or small impact.
and Nan, they would have to, whatever the design would be or whatever the proposal would be, they would have to mitigate or show a plan for drainage, right?
Correct.
And
Absolutely.
and maybe, you know, having that done, because right now, I don't know when that parking lot was done, but
Yeah,
a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, maybe it's been re-blacktop
Yeah,
since
no,
then,
it's-
but it's been there, to my
and
knowledge.
who's to say they're gonna use that pattern of, I mean, who knows? We have no idea what they're gonna do for that.
Yeah, and
This is
that
no
would have to be engineered, and that's the
We're
role.
assuming.
Yeah, the role of the stormwater pollution prevention plan is to look at, based on topography and coverage of the lot, they would engineer where the grading would have to be, where is there a stormwater detention pond, how are you gonna handle that runoff? They would have to look at the topography of the area to see, you know, where water would pool. So that is what the stormwater pollution prevention plan would look like. And the planning board has within its power, especially through the aquifer overlay, that says that you're not supposed to have anything that alters the flow of water. And the site plan requirements is that the planning board could ask for a study. It's called a HEC-RAS study, and it basically studies the flow of the water and what building and changing that parcel would do to flooding on that parcel or downstream. And so the planning board has it within their power to ask for that kind of study.
So E, the proposed action may change floodwater flows that contribute to flooding.
Yeah, I think yeah.
Right? We say,
Well,
Small.
there may be an impact, but
right,
I don't, you know,
I can't say that it's a large right now. We have no idea what.
and I don't believe there's a dam for the last one.
Not on that property.
Not on
Yeah.
any of them, right,
Couple upstream.
yeah. So, no or small impact.
Do we know where the septic system is down there?
Are we all comfortable with that for section
Yeah,
5?
yeah.
Okay, section 6, impacts on air.
So these, again, like some of the other things, these are specifically defined as state regulated air emissions.
Mhm.
So, I said no because none of the activities that would take place in a hospitality overlay would address, would be in regards to those state regulated emissions. There's no smokestacks or anything like that that's gonna be
Cold burning.
Yeah.
Right.
coming anywhere near those levels of regulated air emissions.
Right.
Yeah, I
Okay,
agree with that, and
all right.
you'll agree on that.
Yep,
Yep.
So 7,
Seven.
impact on plants and animals. I think yes is correct to answer. Because any time you do anything, any kind of construction, it would impact,
Sure.
I would think, plants and animals, because you're
Right.
presumably moving habitat or trees and plants and
Mhm.
things.
In that little gray area of the text in there, I added that the Cottonwood area, recognize that that's a sensitive location. We recognize that there's a riparian area there. That there are, that's certainly an important plant and animal habitat that we would want to pay attention to. So this form recognizes that. But again, just like all of the other categories, is that all of that would have to be, they would have to show that the disturbance and the construction on that parcel doesn't impact adversely to plants and animals on that parcel. So that's really what the planning board's job is to do in a site-specific review.
Okay. I'm reading
Right,
through
so
this.
did we want to read them out loud and go through?
Sure. The proposed action may cause reduction in population or loss of individuals of any threatened or endangered species. Say no or small impact.
Mhm.
The proposed action may result in the reduction or degradation of any habitat used by any rare, threatened, or endangered species. I'd say no or small impact. I mean, particularly in 2 of the areas where they're adaptive reuse. I mean, maybe they would have to move some trees or other land, but it seems like there's, particularly in the Cottonwood area, it's a lot of already sort of blacktop, and
Yeah.
particularly where the Millbrook Training Center is. The proposed action may cause reduction in population or loss of individuals of any species of special concern or conservation need. It's a no or small impact.
Mhm.
The proposed action may result in the reduction or degradation of any habitat used by any species of special concern and conservation need. I would say no or small impact. I think there is something in the Cottonwood by the stream. I can't remember if it's salamanders or turtle. There's something, there, but it's within that, it's in the stream area, not in the land area. The proposed action may diminish the capacity of a registered national natural landmark. No, the proposed action may result in the removal of or ground disturbance in any portion of the designated significant natural community. No.
I just wanted to mention, for that one, I just wanted to mention that we did look at the New York State DEC data in your NRI that is recognized, that area along the creek there is recognized as an important area for terrestrial animals, which might have been like a salamander.
That's what or turtles. That's what I was when I mentioned the creek, but they would still have that 100-foot buffer.
Yeah, all of that would have to, and they would, and how I would see this playing out is that if someone came forward to do something on the Cottonwood site, they would have to go out and survey that site and look to see what's there and bring that information to the planning board and then proceed with their design accordingly to protect that area.
Okay, the proposed action may substantially interfere with nesting, breeding, foraging, or overwintering habitat. No. The proposed action requires the conversion of more than 10 acres of forest. No. Proposed action involves use of herbicides or pesticides. No. Hostile area near Wappingers Falls, important habitats, but none mapped on those parcels. Other Wait, sorry, excuse me, Nan, HOS is hospitality
Yeah.
areas in
The
inner near,
hospitality overlay, yes. the district.
okay, in inner near riparian areas,
Mhm.
so no or small.
Right.
Are we all in agreement with the
Mhm,
responses
yeah,
there
Very
for
much so,
7?
yes.
Okay. Impact agricultural resources. Yes. Why, Nan, did you put yes for this? I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
just because I thought, again, thinking that in a rural area, anytime we have development,
Mhm.
could make an area less suitable broadly, the more development there is, that it could have impact to make agriculture
Mhm.
either less able to continue or that the development pressures, extend into rural areas. And so because you're in a rural area and there's agriculture in the town, could something like this have an impact on agriculture as, more of, I don't know. I just thought that because there were agricultural areas nearby, that there was potential. I
Even
guess-
if they're not neighboring, like directly neighboring, I guess Daytop is across the
My-
street from Thorndale, I don't know.
Yeah, but my gut is no on this.
Yeah,
one.
I mean, I was thinking
We're-
about neighboring,
we're not-
like farms, because it's very
We're not
concentrated
interfering with farmland.
in, where Daytop, meaning there, it's not open, it's not near to a working farm or any
Okay.
of the working farms that we have
Right.
registered in our NRI.
But they're across the street
Right,
on the other side of 44.
right.
Yeah, yeah, so I don't know, but even that part is not farmed like directly across the street,
Right.
like directly there, so I don't know what the criteria is, if you feel like it's, based on the potential for, more traffic or more, something like that to a broader part of the community, but there aren't any farms or registered farms that are in our NRI that are adjacent to
Okay,
any of these areas.
okay.
So I don't know, if you feel like it's broad, we can put yes and then have no or small impact, which, it's not going to limit access to agricultural land. Proposed action may
I think-
impact soil classified, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's why I probably checked yes, was because
Okay,
one of the questions is, are there prime agricultural soils in an area? And that's what the A is, group 1 through 4 are prime farmland soils. So there are prime farmland soil, even though they've already been developed, the soils are still there. So I think
Okay,
that's probably
okay.
more of the reason
All
why.
right, well, that's
I
fine
said
then.
yes.
Okay.
we can leave that as is. I see you put soils of statewide importance exist in the hospitality overlay, just most areas are already developed. I see, okay.
So.
Are we comfortable then with having this say
Yeah.
yes and then the no's?
Yes, absolutely.
Impact on aesthetic resources. Well, I think there might be a positive impact in new areas. So I'm kidding, I'm reading this. The land use that proposed action are obviously different from or in sharp contrast to current land use patterns between the proposed project and scenic or aesthetic resource. Bless you.
And so again,
So
this
yeah.
one is specifically defined, the aesthetic resources are not just like the general character of the area, but these are state, county, or local designated scenic areas. And so
Oh,
I didn't find any designated scenic area, so unless I'm missed something, I didn't find anything that said, though, that's a scenic byway or a town designated scenic road.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's cool.
I'm sorry, Susan, you're speaking?
Fowler Road is a scenic road.
Which road, I'm sorry?
Fowler Road is a town designated scenic road.
Oh, did you hear that Fowler Road is a town designated scenic road?
Okay, well, if it is, then we should.
Okay, then
So
let's change it
we'll
to
change
yes.
this to yes, yeah.
Well, you could change it to yes, just as you did last time and go through and check the appropriate
Yeah.
boxes, but it does talk here about obviously or sharply in contrast.
Right.
Yeah,
So I think you'd be justified either way. I just point that out, but there's no particular harm.
Right.
it's
Well,
definitely not in
here we
sharp
have two
contrast.
abandoned
Right.
dilapidated buildings.
Yeah.
So in terms of their aesthetic impact to that scenic road, one could argue would be an improvement,
I
right?
would think, right,
But,
and that's why I think you could,
But if
Check
if
no.
there are people, if people want to see it as a as just impact,
Mhm.
you know, because it's on a scenic road and it might change.
Yeah.
There's
Then
no
we
harm
could
to
always
it.
click,
There's-
hit yes, and
Right.
then go through
Exactly.
and hit the no or small.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do that.
So the proposed action may be visible from any officially designated federal, state, or local scenic or aesthetic resource.
Well, no, I guess less from the road, but I
Yeah,
think small
Small
impact or
impact.
positive impact. Proposed action may result in the obstruction, elimination, or significant screening of one or more officially designated scenic views. No.
no,
Proposed action would be visible from publicly accessible vantage points. You know, I don't know the answer to that. I would say no, and I don't think there's any public park on Fowler Road.
Mhm.
There already is an impact. I mean, there already is right now dilapidated
It's
buildings there.
just,
So I would say,
it's whatchamacallit, the
Carryover.
carry over.
Yeah.
So. I
but
mean,
it's not you can't see the viewpoint. It's not
Yeah.
a tall
So
vantage
small
point.
impact anyways.
Right, it's the visibility.
Right,
The situation or activity in which viewers are engaged while viewing the proposed action is routine travel by residents, including travel to and from work, recreation or tourism-based activities. Yes, you can see it, but
Yeah.
I think it's intended
situational activity.
to be a
One of the
change
three
of,
zones you can see.
Wow.
Yeah.
Viewing, yeah,
okay, so small impact,
Yeah.
or positive
Yeah.
impact maybe, but
positive.
may cause a diminishment of public enjoyment and appreciation, no. There are similar projects visible within the following distance of the proposed project,
Mhm.
yes. Well, there are commercial projects right across the street visible.
There are similar projects visible within the following distance of the proposed project.
Oh,
And what's-
Yes,
what is
Fowler Road
south?
is right across from that other commercial,
Right.
the Bath Center and the,
Hmm.
across the street. Okay, so we hit
Yeah, but-
yes for that,
Yeah,
Nan.
but wait, the similar projects.
There are
Oh.
similar projects visible within the following distance of the proposed project.
Right,
There are
so like what's the similar project to
Commercial
an inn,
a commercial
to a
project.
hospitality?
Oh, you think, how would you define that?
That's- The hospitality is what we're discussing, and where
Okay.
is there a similar hospitality?
I put
Anywhere.
no or small, meaning commercial, but
Yeah, we put, you know,
that was how I was thinking of
Yeah.
it. But if it's
we're not trying to
hospitality.
promote commercial, it's hospitality. And
No, I know, but what I'm saying is it's no either way, right?
Right.
Because we're saying,
It's-
I
yeah.
just, the way that I read that is a similar project
Yeah.
would be something that's, but no, are there any hospitality things?
No.
No, but
No.
it's still, we're gonna hit no on that
Yeah.
because it's small or no impact.
Mhm.
So I just want to review. So we're changing that to yes. I'm making a note that Fowler Road is a town designated scenic road. And you've
Yeah.
chosen no or small impact for all of those.
Yes.
Okay.
Impact on historic and archaeological resources. There are
So I
no,
will- Yep, that was a no because, I looked up on the state database, the, cultural resource information. Chris, what's the S stand? Survey maybe, or source. And there were no, historic or archaeological resources identified there.
Mhm. Okay.
Yep.
Very good.
and non-contiguous, so these are all no
Mhm.
here.
Cool.
Okay, so no, they're all no.
Yep. So-
Impact on open space and recreation.
I didn't think that would cause any, these were not recreational areas used by, the public for a park or anything like that.
Yep, I agree with that.
Mhm.
Impact on critical environmental areas.
So critical environmental area is something specifically designated by the town under seeker to identify a location as having some sort of critical, unique attribute that is part of seeker, and you do not have a critical environmental area in town.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yes,
Impact on transportation.
okay.
It's a yes, for sure.
Okay,
This is
so
everyone.
yes.
Okay.
May exceed capacity of existing road network.
Mhm.
I would say no or small impact. And the reason why I would say no or small impact is because of the capacity that existed prior, both at the Cottonwood, at the Millbrook Training Center, at Daytop, when it was either a rehab facility or before when it was an inn, when Altamont was also there, and when there were other B&Bs. We've had many more rooms in existence in the past here than we have none really now besides a few B&Bs. So, yes, there will be an impact, but we've had the same existing road networks. I'm pretty comfortable with saying no or
Yeah.
small.
And I want to point out there too, in the part one, there was in the section F, there was data that was collected from the Department of Transportation data viewer that looks at traffic counts along those stretches of the road. And some of those stretches of the roads has actually seen a decrease in traffic over the years. And the highways, not Fowler Road, but the highways are all designated as principal arterials, and the level of service is such, there's, these would not impact or change the level of service on those roads. And I did also note that the planning board, a traffic impact analysis is often done when there's more than 100 cars per day coming in, as a result of a project. So again, the planning board is part of their site plan and special use permit reviews are required to look at traffic. They're required to analyze that. A site-specific seeker would be required to look at that. And if there was more than 100 cars per day proposed, a traffic impact analysis could be done. And, then they would have to plan accordingly based on the results of that study.
Okay, and we did note here that there could be a small increase on Fowler Road or College Lane. We did make that change, I'll just note, from our first draft to our second, designating the main entrance on 44, which becomes 82 or 343.
Yeah. Right.
Just to alleviate any, real concern about that increasing traffic in any significant way on College Lane. Okay, so we're all in agreement on 13. 14, impact on energy. Proposed action will require a new, you put no here, and I agree with that. We'll create a new or an upgrade to an existing substation. Will require the creation or extension of an energy transmission or supply system to serve more than 50 single or two-family residences. No. Proposed action may utilize more than 2,500 megawatt hours per year. Proposed action may involve heating and or cooling of more than 100,000 square feet of building area.
So no for that.
We all in agreement with that?
For sure.
Impact on noise.
That's just a no at the top.
Yeah.
Yes, no at the top. I just went through those just to make sure that we were all in agreement. Impact on noise, odor, and noise, odor, and light. I guess the odor, combined with the noise, it might affect the noise. I mean, the nose. Proposed action may result in an increase in noise, odors, or outdoor lighting. Yes, correct.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I agree with your assessment that it's no or small. We also put some parameters around the wattage for the lighting. I know.
So we should go through
the proposed action may produce sound above noise levels established by local regulation. Well, no, we don't have any local regulation right now around noise either. Proposed action may result in blasting within 1,500 feet of any resident. No.
Blasting, no.
Proposed action may result in routine odors for more than an hour per day. No. May result in light shining onto adjoining properties. No. May result in lighting creating sky glow brighter than existing air conditions. No. And then I would note that
for the record,
outdoor lighting.
B and E were really not no's in my head. They were small impact.
Small, yes.
Yeah.
What said sky glow brighter than existing area conditions? I don't know. I guess maybe current existing conditions, because the Cottonwood, part of it's not operational, part of it is, and then I guess Daytop would be re-operational, perhaps. But I like your final note here, Dan. Outdoor lighting may occur and hospitality overlay Dark sky compliance will be required. Site plan, special use reviews will
Mhm.
evaluate and mitigate lighting impacts.
Mhm.
Are we all in
Yeah,
agreement
sure.
there?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Impact on human health. The proposed action may have an impact on human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants. We put no, and, you know, we can go through all these, but it's pretty, do you want to read through them quickly? It has to do with, you know, is it located within 1,500 feet of a school, hospital, licensed daycare center? The site of the well, there's the area across from the, I mean.
But look at what the question is the proposed action may have an impact on human health from
Human health,
exposure
right,
to
I
new
see.
or existing sources of.
No, it'd have to be contaminants, right?
To new
So
or
no,
existing
okay.
sources of contaminant, right?
Okay, number 17, consistency with community plans. The proposed action is not consistent with adopted land use plans. No. It's not, whether it's our comp plan or our current code.
Yeah, the way the seeker words this question has always struck me as a little weird because it's kind of like a double negative or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like.
But it is consistent with the community plan because it was specifically called for to have a hospitality overlay in the comprehensive plan with these kinds of parameters and protections. So it is consistent. So, but the way this question is written, it says the proposed action is not consistent with
You're
the.
saying no because, yeah. right.
Okay,
Yeah, and frankly, you have to find that it's consistent or you can't change the code.
right,
Yeah.
right. Okay, so that, no, and then consistency with community character. Proposed project is inconsistent with the existing community character.
So that's like a reverse.
And why did you put, wait, why would that be yes?
I
If
think
we-
just because I guess I feel that any kind of development has the potential to impact community character. And
Okay,
so again, looking at
but
this.
but it's not says impact, it says it's inconsistent with the existing.
But it's not saying it's negative or positive. They're saying
Proposed
inconsistent.
project is
Oh.
inconsistent with the existing
It's
community
not
character.
inconsistent.
Okay, I mean, I
So-
trust your reading, Nan, if that's how you, it just, to me, it
So-
seems like it's going, it's,
Like.
Well, I
see
think,
where you-
but remember that here's how I look at it, is that community character is not just aesthetics. Community character represents all of the built and the unbuilt features of the community. So I was really looking at this is adaptive reuse of these areas going to change the intensity of use of those areas? Yes, it will.
I
And
see.
so I'm really looking at there's potential for small impacts to intensity,
Mhm.
the traffic. We just talked about small impacts to lighting and things like that. So those are changes, whether they're inconsistent or not. I think that's, you're going to have
Okay.
to.
So don't view it as a
Okay.
negative or a
I
positive.
see.
It's
All
not
right.
an
Uh,
It might be helpful if the board went through each individual question in this section, just so everyone's on the same page with their response.
I'm sorry, Taryn, what'd you say?
So I think it might be helpful for the board to go through each individual question in this section, just so everyone is on the same page with their response.
Yeah,
Right.
we're
Sure.
just going to, thanks, Karen.
Okay, the proposed action may replace or eliminate existing facilities, structures, or areas of historic importance to the community. No. I mean, they will be,
They're not historic.
but they're not historic, hopefully replacing
Yeah.
or restoring, but not of historic importance. Proposed action may create a demand for additional community services, schools, police, and fire, I would say small.
Small, absolutely.
Proposed
but,
action may displace affordable or low-income housing in an area where there's a shortage of such housing. No. Proposed action may interfere with the use or enjoyment of officially recognized or designated public resources. No,
No.
in my view. Proposed action is inconsistent with the predominant architectural scale and character. No. Proposed action is inconsistent with the character of the existing natural landscape. No. Other impacts, the hospitality overlay is in part intended to promote adaptive reuse of existing buildings currently part of community character, more intensity of use could cause minor impacts.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so we've gone
So that's
through
that.
each one. What is our next step?
Yeah,
Karen,
so-
why don't you go ahead with part 3 then?
Yeah, of course. So I think at this point, it would be appropriate if the board recommended that Nan and I were to prepare the part 3 of the EAF to
Okay,
pretty much discuss the decisions that you made tonight with respect to these questions. That'll ultimately help you make your determination of significance. And so
okay,
that's the first thing. And based on the discussion tonight, if the board feels that a negative declaration might be appropriate, the board may also direct that Nan and I prepare a draft negative declaration for the board to consider at a subsequent meeting. And how that would work is we would go through the EAF part 3 first and make sure that the board is comfortable with the justification to all these different questions. And pending the discussion on that, we can then move to discuss the negative declaration. But it's only if you feel that you might be moving in that direction.
okay, yeah, I mean, I think that we're all in agreement with our responses. I don't want to speak for the board, are we all in agreement with our responses to this part 2?
Yes,
And from what my understanding, Bob, you're in agreement?
yes.
From my understanding, then we would ask Nan to prepare part 3. I don't know at what point, you'll have to remind me or about when do we wait for part 3 before we make any kind of designation negative declaration, correct? Or do you do that before you draft part 3?
Part
I
3,
think what I hear you suggesting is that this board could authorize the drafting of the neg deck resolution for consideration. But I think that, which you could.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think what you're trying to make clear is you can't do that at a step, right? First.
I just want to understand the
first, yeah,
steps
part
and make
two
sure
has
that
gotta
we're
be okay,
following
and
the
then-
steps.
Did I get
properly.
that right? I don't want to.
Don't jump.
yeah,
in
you're
there.
exactly correct. So that
Yeah.
in any circumstance, the board would consider the part 3 first. But based on the discussion of all the different potential adverse environmental impacts we discussed tonight, if the board feels that those impacts are not significant, we could prepare a draft negative declaration for the board to consider after reviewing the part 3.
Okay, I
Yes.
think that's a great
That
step to
would be
take.
appropriate, yes.
Are we all in agreement on that? Do you
Yeah.
need a
Yes.
resolution from us to do that? Do we need a resolution or we can just direct ask them to do that?
You should do a resolution. You don't need a
Okay.
written resolution, but. yes,
Right,
I
of
think
course,
there should be
yeah.
A motion.
Motion.
A
Okay.
motion, so
Right, sorry, I meant a motion,
Yeah, that's
sorry.
okay.
Okay, so
You're gonna
I'll
make
make,
that
I'll
motion.
make the motion then that we will ask you to draft a draft of the
A negative declaration.
negative declaration and of part 3
3 of the secret.
of seeker,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi,
Aye. Aye.
anything else?
And that's it.
I apologize for interrupting, but I've got to be someplace else. And I've got a couple of comments that I think are pertinent to the situation. First, I'm absolutely in favor of rejuvenating the situation that's present. Okay, we have a bad situation, we have to make it better. It's about process. Overlays are typically to create a restrictive environment given a zoning situation. This overlay opens things up. I think that's a bad precedent to set. My personal feeling, as I've expressed to you before, is that the parcels should be changed in their zoning. A change in zoning is concrete, it's fixed, and the threshold is much higher to any challenge going forward, especially someone who may come along later and ask for another overlay. That's number one. Number two, the 3 parcels. 2 parcels are clearly dilapidated. 2 parcels clearly need some type of input, or we're going to have a situation not dissimilar from what's happened at Bennett. The 3rd parcel, on the other hand, is totally dissimilar. It is not a reuse. It is a situation that is a potential catastrophe for the town and or the adjacent property that's being developed. There's a water problem there. The water comes down from Altamont. We dealt with that on the planning board time and time again. Altamont did their best. The county has done their best. They've changed the collection system on the stream at the base of the monument at least 3 times during the term that I was sitting on that board. I'm aware of it because not only were there complaints, but I also own property along that road. And every time there is a significant rain, I'm not talking about a 1 in an X number of year storm, but a significant rain. There's water in the basement in every one of those houses, number one. And number two, more importantly, we all have septics. And what ends up happening is we start to get septic leach vertical up to the surface. And that's a problem. If you go ahead across Alcyon on the parcel that formerly was Lisa's parcel, and you put in a huge septic system, which would be required for any type of hospitality, whether it be restaurant, whether it be hotel rooms, whatever. The vast amount of waste that's going to sit there is going to be significantly greater than what's there now. And we already have a problem. I'm not talking about future potential storms. I'm talking about routine water runoff. The other problem is, Nan made a comment about approvals that are under site plan approval. Yes, it would require Department of Health approval for an appropriate septic. The problem is that Department of Health evaluates a ratio between number of rooms and size of septic leach field, which is directly related to the PERC, which is all very important when you develop a septic system. But what it doesn't take into account is the reverse flow when there's increased water flow. And that's something the Department of Health does not evaluate. And that's something we used to have to determine at the planning board. But going forward, it becomes more difficult every year. So I can tell you over the 20 plus years that I've owned the property south of the monument, every year it gets worse. And it doesn't necessarily get worse in a linear fashion. Our storms are very variable. And when you put into place the opportunity for the planning board to determine something based upon data that's impossible for them to determine, it potentially creates a problem. And that's not just for the local property owners, it's for the town. So the point of this is, I think it's a good idea to alter the zoning on Cottonwood. I think it's a good idea to alter the zoning on Daytop, but I think including that other parcel is a mistake. If you have questions about what I just said, I'm happy to.
I don't have
No.
questions. I just have a comment about the overlay piece. So someone cannot come along and ask for an overlay. The reason why the overlays are legal and it's not spot zoning, because I've heard that from, other residents, is because of the process that the town went through.
Sure.
So Jim Stout, who's been doing this for many, many years, advised that that was the right route to go, and that's what we've done. So I just think that that's something I just want to respond to, that I feel very comfortable with that approach. And we, talked a lot about it, obviously, over the past few years, and that was a recommendation coming out of the addendum from the CPRC.
Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah.
very familiar with that, as you're aware. And my response is, in a situation where there's potential for litigation, under New York state law, zoning is a much firmer criteria to be in. And since the approval has been there to change anyway, all I'm saying is to change it to a more fixed parameter rather than this.
But there are other
nebulous
issues with
measure.
fixed parameters, meaning then you can't just open it up for one particular commercial use. And so I think, I appreciate that. I think we're going to go with the recommendation from legal counsel on that and what the best approach is there. The other piece is that with litigation, if that were to come along as it relates to those particular overlay locations, we have a comprehensive plan and addendum to that plan that we have to then legislate based upon that. There's no other areas in the town, with the exception of the village, which we don't have jurisdiction over, and Mabbittsville, which you can still have 20 room ins. By the way, you can have a 20 room in right now, according to village zoning, right across the street from Halcyon, right where Bennett College is. That's included in their zoning. So all the flood issues and all those other issues are applicable
I'm sorry,
there.
It's included in which zoning?
The village's zoning, the area across the
That's not
street.
village.
Yeah,
That's town. No,
Bennett.
that's town.
No,
No,
Bennett is
Bennett
village.
is village.
Across from that
Yeah,
No,
yeah, we know what you're
understand
saying,
that, but what
Paul.
we're saying, right across the street. So anyway, I don't
No
want to,
daycare, children's center.
Yeah.
that whole
That
area is currently part of their 20 in room, their code, which would allow 20
Sure.
rooms there. Yeah.
No, I understand that, but it doesn't make it better to create a situation.
No, I'm not
across
saying,
the
I'm
street.
not, I'm just addressing the fact that this
So,
sort of, well, anyway.
What's
I
happening
disagree.
here, as we explained in the very beginning, we're opening up an opportunity. We realize that maybe the parcel that you're talking about might not even get a 5-room in. We realize that. But at least if the opportunity exists.
And that's my point.
Okay,
There's
yeah.
there's a problem there.
So
which-
they'll come to the,
On the secret that you've just gone through, I didn't want to interrupt during it, but on secret, there is a significant impact. It's a marked impact on that parcel.
it's a marked impact for anybody that proposes something to go on that proposal.
That's not.
No, I
That's
just,
true.
I disagree. I think we're gonna follow, we're gonna thank you for your thoughts.
Thanks for taking the time, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul.
So we're officially through this.
Yes, we are.
Nan, anything further on this? Do you want to you and Taryn want to connect on or we can, just talk about the part 3 piece a little bit?
I think that Taryn, if you directed us to work to develop the part 3, we can draft it and submit it to you for review and discussion, and you'll have to make a decision.
Okay.
May I also comment, and I can tell that the gentleman needs to get out of here, but I do want to put on the record, I do not think it's the case that a challenge to an overlay district is any more or less susceptible to a successful challenge in litigation. As I think was explained when we started, and I agree with it, an overlay district is a zoning tool. It's just a way to impose zoning restrictions within certain parameters. You have kind of gateway provisions to get you in the overlay, and then everything else follows from it.
Exactly.
I really don't think it's any more susceptible. If there's a problem with this zoning, somebody will challenge it one way or another, whether you make it a specific zone. And I think you're probably more likely to get a spot zoning challenge if you just pick 1 or 3 sites and say, we're going to rezone you, we're going to rezone you, we're going to rezone you.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a good
Thank
But
point.
that's why we went through the exercise.
I'm sure.
With the town for 2 years in the report.
Yeah. And Jim's South does know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Thank you, Nan, very much for all of your time, and Taryn for your time. We really, and whoever else is joining us, all of
So
your time.
I guess the next thing would be you'll let us know when part 3 is prepared, right? You'll send it to us, and then we'll schedule another meeting just like this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The document
All
we
right.
went through tonight.
Yeah, I mean, Taryn, did you want to talk about how this fits into the rest of the adoption process?
Right.
Yeah, so obviously the public hearing is still open on the hospitality law, so you have to hold your continued public hearing and ultimately close it. And before the board can adopt the overlay legislation, it's required to make its determination of significance. So the next big step is adopting a neg deck, if that's what you so choose.
Back to the public hearing that's still open.
Yeah.
We closed that.
I think we
When
closed
or-
that. Well, do we have to note it? We need to not notice it because it's still open. So I asked that question of Kyle. But we probably, since we advertise this as just a seeker meeting, we would wait to designate that for our next meeting or have it on the agenda for our next meeting before we were to close that.
I mean, when would be an appropriate time to close the public hearing?
I mean, with the board,
Better.
I mean, it really depends on if there's a lot of people who are still queuing up and want to get their comments in, it's appropriate to leave the hearing open. But if you have a continued public hearing and it seems like public engagement has kind of died down and everyone has said what they want to say, that's when it's appropriate to close the public hearing. So you could put on your agenda continued public hearing. You could put, EAF Part 3 review and consider adoption of neg deck and HOS legislation.
Okay,
You don't have to commit to a course of action, but you just have to notice it.
All right.
okay.
Thank-
Okay, maybe
yeah.
we'll do that then for our next meeting, or we
Can I
can,
make one
depending on,
comment?
depending on how much time, Nan, you need to, work on part 3.
Yeah, I'll communicate
you
with
absolutely
Tim
can
and
comment,
we'll
but I
talk
did just-
about
I
the
did get a
timeframe
note
and then
from-
get back to you
Yeah.
on what we think we could do it in.
Because the next meeting of the board is next Thursday.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely not by next Thursday.
No.
Yeah,
No,
correct.
yeah, the next meeting is the 9th.
Yeah,
Which is
Yes,
next
yes,
Thursday.
yeah.
Howard, you had something you
I have a
wanted.
question for Nan. Basically, we're talking about the size of the buildings, 20 rooms, 10 rooms, whatever. Wouldn't that have some sort of an impact on the negative, on what we just talked about for the last hour? If you would have a lower number of rooms, or smaller allowed constructions on these, the answers might be different than if you had 40 rooms instead of 20 rooms and so on. Would that have any effect on the seeker that you just went, whole process that you just went through? Knowing how many buildings would be allowed, how many rooms?
Well, I can't speak for the board and their perspective, but I reviewed this in the perspective of what the zoning is proposing, which was 20 rooms with the possibility of extra if they did an adaptive reuse. So that was the lens that was used when, at least when I looked
Yes, I
at it.
agree with that, but.
Can't speak for the board.
The
Right,
public
but I-
hearings were asking, would there be a possibility to change that? And if you change that to smaller rooms allowed, if the town board decided maybe we should have less than more, then the seeker questions would be different in my mind. For example, the Cottonwood is a good example. This is an adaptive reuse. If you have a much smaller adaptive reuse requirement, that sensitive area would be more protected. And you might have a different answer to.
right, but I, at least I can speak for myself that I had that in mind. I mean, that has 20 rooms already on the one site, and the other space when it wasn't in had 20 rooms. So the only way they get more than 20 is if it's an adaptive reuse of the existing space. So I already had that in my mind when I was answering my
Correct,
questions, and I don't know if you all had the same. And Nan, I would assume what you said that you did with knowing that there's adaptive reuse, and then there would be the potential, I guess, for a new build.
I mean, how could we not have it in our mind? We've been discussing this for going on 4 years.
But so I think the
Yeah.
idea is that
It's in our mind.
the most conservative approach, in other words, in reviewing this, what I hear Nan say, what I hear you say is it, to your comments, or it could almost only get better, right? In other words, you've already considered, what if somebody maxed out on our zone? That's what you're thinking about in terms of adopting this.
Mhm.
If they do, then you consider those impacts. If they don't, it means it's less than that, and that's okay too.
Exactly.
Well, generally, people will max out because there's money in it. But that's why, it's important.
No, that's not true.
So they still have to meet all of the underlying requirements. Okay, but the public hearing's not closed, so if you have other comments you want to make whenever we said that, you certainly can.
That was just a question for Nan. Change the number of rooms allowed, and would have changed the questions on the seekers that you're filling out right now.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the answer to that is yes.
No,
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 No.
Howard,
No.
no.
we
just got finished
answered
telling you.
based on what we anticipated to max out. So so that's what all our answers were, the max out. Somebody comes in and does less, we've already accommodated the max, so their impact is going to be less by logic.
All right. Doesn't make any sense to me. And when you answer yes or no, if you have a max that's lower, then people don't have to do the max at a lower level still.
Howard wants to.
Still gonna have to meet,
Yeah,
you know,
I
even if
understand that.
someone came
That's not
with
what we're-
5 rooms, they're still gonna have to meet all those other
Right.
criteria and requirements.
I think what you're suggesting, sir, is that the potential of actually modifying the law so that the max is
That's-
lower, but
that's-
that's just
that's-
not, that's not what's on the.
Yeah, that's that's exactly what I am, but that would be less possibly dangerous to whatever we're doing.
And that's a reasonable comment at the public hearing. Right.
All right.
It wouldn't change tonight's answers.
Right.
That was my question, and
Okay.
everyone's what we're doing tonight, okay,
Okay,
good enough.
so we have other issues that we have to do in executive session, so I have to excuse everybody and thank you for
Okay.
coming.
All right,
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. bye-bye.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Good night.
No.
I think we're good.
Well, actually, I don't.